The place to start on this Monday afternoon is with a breakdown of the Sweet 16 of this 2025 NCAA tournament that is filled up pretty good with SEC schools. We started with 14 SEC teams in this bracket. 7 of them remain, which means the SEC is now officially the first conference ever to put 14 teams in a bracket, and also the first conference ever to put 7 teams into the Sweet 16. Norlander, last night on Inside College Basketball, right here on CBS Sports Network, I was asked whether I thought the SEC had met expectations coming in to this NCAA tournament. I said I think so. How would you answer that question?
I think the SEC has met expectations. When you have 14 in, you should, from a probability standpoint, considering where some teams are seeded, and a lot of the SEC teams that didn't advance, they didn't exceed seed expectation. But you've got 1 seed Auburn, they're into the Sweet 16. You've got 6 seed Ole Miss exceeding seed expectations into the Sweet 16. You've got Tennessee and Kentucky, the 2 and 3, they're here as they should be. You've got Bama, a 2 seed, here as it should be. I think I'm missing one more in there. But regardless, I would say they have met expectations. I would think the expectations were pretty high on the SEC. It felt like there was a little bit of schadenfreude that was waiting in the wings because the league got so many teams into the tournament that if it didn't send at least 4 or 5 into the Sweet 16, that it would have fallen on its face. That didn't happen. We now have a record by nature of what we've seen across the board. Mighty impressive. You got to get 14 in to have a good chance at 7, but they had 14 into the field. And whether you want to debate on Texas, regardless, 13 were inarguably of NCAA tournament quality from a resume standpoint. And so here we are, history made in consecutive Sundays for the SEC with the most bids and now with the most representation ever in a regional semifinal.
I guess it'd be more impressive if the SEC, had won every single game that any of its members had played in this NCAA tournament, but that's obviously not realistic. And so I think it's important to look at the teams that are no longer around. It's Missouri, Oklahoma, Georgia, Vanderbilt, Mississippi State, Texas, and Texas A&M. Every one of those teams, other than Texas A&M, were supposed to be gone by now anyway, based on seeding. Again, the only SEC team that didn't make the Sweet 16 that was seeded in a way that suggested it should make the Sweet 16 is Texas A&M, and that's a Texas A&M team that was a 4 seed, and it was eliminated by a 5 seed that belonged to Michigan that is on a little bit of a streak right now and just, not too long ago won the Big Ten tournament. So 1 seed Auburn is still alive. 1 seed Florida is still alive. 2 seed Tennessee is still alive. 2 seed Alabama is still alive. 3 seed Kentucky is still alive, plus 6 seed Ole Miss and 10 seed Arkansas. And if you just look at the odds to win the 2025 NCAA tournament right now, Duke is the favorite at plus 220. But of the 6 schools with the best odds, 4 of them belong to SEC schools, specifically Florida, Auburn, Alabama, and Tennessee. So when you frame it like that, this league has performed pretty well and still has, I think at least 4 teams, maybe more. I don't want to sell anybody short, but I think at least 4 teams that can have reasonable hopes right now to try to win this national championship.
Hey, GP, do you think that this is enough for the SEC to claim greatest single season ever? I don't necessarily think they need a champion, but I do think that the conference probably needs at least 1 school to make the Final Four to have some real heft to it. Would you agree? Just, by pure nature of it, you don't get one of these into the Final Four minimally to San Antonio. To me, I think if you want to really have a credible claim to that, short of even having a national champion, maybe we get that. Feels like at least one of these got to break through with 2 more wins, right?
I think it's too early to write that story right now. We got to see how this thing finishes, but let's just play it out, because I think this is maybe not probable, but certainly possible, totally realistic. They could put 2 teams in the Final Four, multiple teams in the Final Four, and then have the national champion. And I think if, as a conference, when this is over, we say the SEC put a record 14 teams in the bracket, put a record 7 teams in the Sweet 16, put multiple teams in the Final Four, and provided the sport with the national champion, I think it's very easy then to say that is the best version of a men's basketball conference we have ever seen. But it's going to be a harder thing to sell to the anti-SEC people if Duke is the team sitting there holding the trophy at the end, or if Houston is the team sitting there holding the trophy at the end.
At the risk of venturing into too much, I don't know, baseless speculation, why do you think there is like some anti-SEC sentiment? Why is it? Maybe it's just people exist in some portions to just crap on everything. But we had this with the Big 12, and that actually, it wasn't just sports fans. That was also ACC coaches a year ago. So it's not like the SEC is alone here. It's just the next one up. It's been the best conference there. But there definitely has been a little bit of that out there. I got no interest in involving myself in that. Like, the conference was incredible statistically from a win percentage standpoint. A reminder, if you're just dialed in here in the past month in college hoops, there had never been a league with at least 10 teams in it, at least 10, and the SEC has 16, that had won a higher percentage of its non-conference games in the history of the sport than the SEC this year. So the data was in, and we saw what they were obviously able to do in the tournament there. Maybe it's just because there's a faction of people that just love to just hop online and hop on and post and hate. But I don't know. It's to me, it's super weird behavior, but it's undeniably out there. People are preying on the SEC's downfall, and I'm not so sure that's going to happen.
Yeah, it's weird behavior. And yeah, if I'm going to prey on downfalls, maybe not prey on the downfall of a league that's got most of the best coaches and most of the money. That's not a good place to be rooting against. But yeah, I think it's a combination of a couple of things. One is people online just like to be negative. I don't know what it is about it. I'm sure we'll study it and get some answers someday, but people just like to be negative. Like my buddy, Chris Vernon, who of course hosts an NBA podcast for The Ringer, works with me in Memphis, always uses this as an example. Like, you could go on YouTube and find a video of John Cena, good John Cena, not heel turn John Cena, but good John Cena doing Make-A-Wish videos with children battling cancer, and it'll have 1 million thumbs down. Like, who is thumbs downing a video of John Cena meeting with a cancer patient? Like, what kind of miserable human do you have to be to decide I'm going to post something negative about this sweet moment? But like, there's millions of people out there doing it every single day. And then I think some of it is us. And I don't mean you and I specifically, but people who don't work in the media love to yell at the media and just tell us we don't know what we're talking about and that we're stupid and that we're wrong. And so there's some of that, because you and I and others have, since very early in this season, been talking about the SEC not only as the best conference in the country, but as the best conference of all time. And Big 12, Big 10, ACC fans, even if it's true, there's some of them who just don't want to hear that. And then they just want the media to be wrong, because we now live in a country where too many people are constantly rooting for the, quote, mainstream media to be wrong. But don't get me off on another subject.
Fair enough. The stories here attached to these 7 schools, all of them have their own interesting story points and angles with all of it. I mean, Auburn, has it regathered itself? It got a good push from Creighton. It wound up winning by 12, but Creighton gave Auburn a real push there on Saturday. With Ole Miss, this is only the second time ever that program has made the Sweet 16. The other one happened back in 2001. Chris Beard has been able to do there on a short timeline what people hoped that he would be able to do when he was hired there, and really made a mess of Iowa State, and Iowa State really fell apart with another bad defensive showing, and the Cyclones couldn't get through. No Keyshawn Gilbert, of course. You go to Alabama over in the East. I'll see them in person on Thursday. They got a real scare from Robert Morris, and that was a very fun game, but they wind up winning that one by 10. And then they become the first team in 105 games to get 80 on St. Mary's. And Nate Oates is trying to go to back-to-back Final Fours, and is certainly on a trajectory. Like, Wimp Sanderson still got him, in terms of wins and NCAA tournament wins. But Nate Oates, if he's sticking around there for the long term, he's going to be the greatest coach in that school's history. No doubt about it, getting them there to that point. Kentucky and Tennessee. Kentucky didn't have much issue with Illinois. Looked really good. Mark Pope gets it done in year 1. I had mentioned this on the show Sunday night, GP. Maybe we can dive into it tomorrow or Wednesday. We got plenty of podcasts for you before we tip off the Sweet 16 again. But Pope's one of 4 coaches that is in year 1 and in the Sweet 16. We've never had this that many in year 1 and a Sweet 16 occupy. And all the schools, they didn't make the tournament or win games last year. For Kentucky against Tennessee, you got the Pope angle. Tennessee's a 2 seed again with Barnes. With that, it's just like, we're waiting. Is this guy going to get a Final Four again? And in some ways, I actually think Tennessee is a little bit undervalued, but it really didn't have much resistance from UCLA, and obviously beat Wofford as well. And then I think the only team I've yet to get to, and I know we're going to talk about next segment, is just Arkansas in general. The Arkansas story, the John Calipari story, and the fact that, he was able to leave and Kentucky to go to Arkansas because Muss left for USC, and that happened because Andy Enfield left for SMU. The whole chain on down the line that we have Arkansas and Kentucky and BYU all in the Sweet 16 when